intend to make this briefing a fortnightly activity that seeks to provide you, members of the media, a sense of what the ANC is thinking about and react timelessly to things that are obtaining in the environment and things that also require the perspective of the governing party and some of those issues in our country. Of course, there are other briefings that we will continue to do to communicate policy positions of the ANC that is often done under the stewardship of the Secretary General will continue. But we will, as a matter of fact, going forward, do these fortnightly briefings to interact with yourselves on some of the pressure points that are there and where you require live responses from the African National Congress. I thought it is important to start off by highlighting that. And so this is the first of them. And we do welcome your presence today. And of course, some of those briefings by this SG, where he then communicates outcomes of meetings such as statutory bodies, National Executive Committee, National Working Committee, sometimes may coincide with our Thursday briefings. But we want to keep to the discipline of keeping you engaged with what the ANC is talking and thinking about on any given matter. So today marks the beginning of that exercise so that we stay glued up with one another and connected with one another more collectively, and in addition to, of course, some of the individual conversations we have and queries that we have. We start off with the manifesto review process that has been undertaken by the African National Congress, seeking to review the implementation of its 2019 manifesto and interacting with structures across the country regarding that with the people of South Africa more importantly. The ANC launched the manifesto review to account to the people about the mandate we received in 2019. Together with the people in various sectors, we discussed the review and what more needs to be done. Nearly 30 years after democracy, South Africa is a better place with a vibrant and resilient democracy. Through 6 ANC governments, we have ensured a continuous program of creating a better life, transforming the economy, creating jobs, seeking to address poverty and inequality, safer communities, as well as advancing the African agenda. So we can say that, in fact, the past 30 years has been a journey of what we will sum up by calling it a journey of transformation. The president of the ANC on September the 3rd introduced the ANC 2019 manifesto review process, introducing the discussion document, which spoke to a number of elements, some of which includes the following: that through the manifesto review document, we are seeking to account on the mandate given to us by the people of South Africa in the 2019 national and provincial elections to govern at the national level in 8 provinces, together with the people in communities and various sectors, to review progress and challenges so that we can strengthen the implementation of these programs of social transformation and a better life for all. We thank South Africans, and thousands of them, who actually made it to these provincial manifesto reviews, and I can say that to date we have already conducted 7 of them, and we are left with the 2 provinces which are coming up on the 8th of October, the province of the Western Cape, as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Turning to the month of September, which is Heritage Month, which according to the theme, national theme, has been dubbed as a month of unity in diversity. In this month of heritage, we call on our communities to be at the forefront of celebrating our rich and diverse heritage. As highlighted in President Ramaphosa's newsletter this week, where he says that today our storytellers, artists, filmmakers, and other creative professionals are telling the stories of South African people. These stories are cultural endowments for the benefit of future generations and are integral to the ongoing task of forging national unity, inculcating national pride, and promoting respect and diversity. Unity in diversity is the national coat of arms, as you know, and derived from one of our indigenous languages, and it calls on all citizens to unite in a sense of belonging and a sense of pride. as it speaks directly and in ancient South African language and culture, deeply woven into the fabric of many indigenous languages. It highlights and celebrates the interconnections of the people, the languages, the cultures, and our collective history. From Kwaito to Amapiano, from Bok music, from Bontivo to Nkowankowa. South Africa is a melting pot that continues to embrace the different values and needs of diverse cultures, and societies become ever more critical as we seek to transform our South Africa. This country was historically characterized by divide and rule instead of unity in diversity. The ANC welcomes the upcoming 20th U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Trade and Economic Cooperation Forum, commonly known as the AGOA Forum. This event, scheduled for the 2nd of November to the 4th of November 2023, is crucial to strengthening economic ties between Sub-Saharan Africa and the United States. The hosting of the AGOA Forum provides an essential platform for discussing sustainable development, trade and investment, and is a welcome demonstration of mutual respect between the two nations. Aggregate exports to the U.S. by 2023 AGOA beneficiaries is at United States dollars, sitting at $17.14 billion for July year to date, with over 6,800 products that have duty-free access to the U.S. under the AGOA agreement. Considering that this conference comes shortly after South Africa has hosted the historic BRICS conference, it also highlights the growing role of South Africa as a global player and leader on the African continent. With the African Continental Free Trade Access and Free Trade Area coming into effect, enhanced economic cooperation can lead to developing nations like ours, growing various markets in the economy and assisting us in broadening our industrial base in South Africa. We commend the South African government for this, and we commend the government officials for their continued participation in international fora such as AGOA, improving trade opportunities for the African continent. The upcoming AGOA Forum in Johannesburg will therefore attract foreign direct investment, and we do believe that can also leverage job opportunities in South Africa. It's a significant event that will strengthen economic ties between the U.S. and Africa and contribute overall to the continent's development. The ANC will endeavor to host and engage the leadership of the Democratic National Convention, and these are U.S. Democrats that have a shared historic vision of seeing a just, humane, equal, non-racial, non-sexist, and equitable society. And this will be done alongside the hosting of this upcoming AGOA Forum that I've referred to. On the matter of the Reserve Bank repo rate, the announcement that we saw this afternoon, the ANC welcomes the decision of the Reserve Bank to leave the repo rate unchanged. We also noted that food inflation has substantially dropped from 10% in July to 8.2% in August. And of course, this really does bode well for addressing challenges related to the cost of living. This is a strong indicator that efforts to ensure that we see a reduction in the rising cost of living are beginning to bear tangible outcomes if these statistics are anything to go by. Global benchmarking is also critical when assessing inflation and related metrics. It is essential to note that in many regions worldwide, inflation is in double digits, especially with food inflation being in the high teen percentage rate. South Africa's ability to contain this is exemplary, and we remain positive on improved financial data. We are also aware that external environmental risk factors, such as the price of crude oil, present a real inflation risk, and we are closely tracking the assessed impact in our internal modeling estimates, including utilizing data that comes from our policy and research environment within the ANC. On matters related to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, NSFAS is one of the most important social development tools orchestrated by the ANC-led government since the beginning of a democratic government. Students from poor and working class families' lives have been transformed by the provision of financial aid so that they develop themselves by accessing higher and further education, training opportunities. Since 1994, the number of people funded by NSFAS have increased by a staggering 155%. Since the early 90s, financial aid has grown from 21.4 million to almost 50 billion. 60% of university students in South Africa are funded by NSFAS, and 90% of TVET college students are funded by NSFAS. There are two pressing challenges, though, that confront the system, which we must deal with, and we try and address these in the statement. How do we ensure that we allocate these resources efficiently and sustainably? Practically in everyday life, these play out as follows. Do the right people have access to financial aid? And how do we close the missing middle gap, which is a persistent and a stubborn challenge? We note that our deployees in government have gone about this by implementing a direct payment solution, which has onboarded 90% of the students in the 21 universities across the country, and that in the two universities, a combined average of 86% of the students have also been onboarded. The challenge is a bit more acute at the University of South Africa, which is 67%, and the University of Fort Hare, where only 56% of the students have been onboarded. The efforts to streamline and actually mainstream the application process against the data that is provided by the South African Social Security Agency, SASSA, by the South African Revenue Services, SARS, and the Department of Home Affairs are commendable. This may also assist in really getting an understanding of how extensive a missing middle challenge or the missing middle problem is, and attending to policy initiatives to address this speedily as part of ongoing improvements in remodeling NSFAS so that it does benefit an overwhelming number of deserving South Africans. On the matter of the South African Social Security Agency, and of course the recent discussions about the role of Postbank, we want to commend our branches, the branches of the ANC first and foremost, for providing us with real-time reports about non-payment of social grants. At the ANC headquarters, we also monitor the public updates provided by the government's deployees. We are deeply concerned that vulnerable households have been placed in a precarious position due to the transitional challenges from one system to another. And of course, this is a matter that was ventilated in the earlier briefing by the two ministers. Our deployees are being engaged by the ANC to ensure clearer communication, live and timeous communication to beneficiaries and to South Africans at large on how the transition is being managed and how long it will take to address the attendant problems. On matters related to cost containment measures at National Treasury, Comrade Enoch Godongwana, who is a deployee as Finance Minister, briefed ANC officials and the Economic Transformation Subcommittee on the challenges facing the economy and the challenges facing our fiscus. The responsible government is aware of these challenges and must find ways to ensure that expenditure yields value for money and productivity. A committee has been established, led by Comrade Mamuluku Kubai, in her capacity as the chairperson of the Economic Transformation Committee of the National Executive Committee, together with members of the Tripartite Alliance, to closely examine how the 4 priorities outlined in the January 8 statement can continue finding tangible expression in the work of the ANC government. And I think we are all familiar with those specific priorities, the detail of which is contained in the statement that you will receive. It should be noted that the capital projects have not been stopped. We are confident in the resilience of our economy. At the beginning of this year, some analysts and pundits have predicted our economic growth to be between negative growth and 0.1%. These projections have been constantly revised upwards to 1%, even amidst a global economic crisis, with many regions worldwide having a real risk of recession this year. The intensity of load shedding will be reduced as load shedding continues to ease with more units, particularly at Busile, anticipated to come online in quarters 3 and 4 this year. We are confident that our people's economy and lives will reap the benefits from that effort that is currently underway under the stewardship of the Minister of Electricity and the entire cabinet. Thank you very much. I will now, at this point, ask for yourselves, colleagues, to engage with us on this statement. You can go ahead, Mwande.
Thank you very much. My name is Mawande. I work for the Sunday World. Shall I shoot all my questions, or take two and take two later?
We can have another second iteration, yes.
Okay. Let me start with NSFAS and SASA and load shedding. Let me club them in this particular question. You know, people are asking themselves, most of these problems, by the way, the issue of NSFAS, SASA, load shedding, the hardest hit by these people, by these problems are the poor, which the ANC has claimed for years that is its core constituents, and it has a bias against the poor. But it would appear that the ANC is becoming an enemy of the poor. Would you admit to that sentiment, to those that say so? It's not me. I'm just representing some of the views that are out there. On load shedding alone, it seems to be getting worse. In fact, it is getting worse. It's a statement of fact. I guess I can say that with my chest. It's getting worse when, in fact, when the current Minister of Electricity was appointed and that minister was created, the impression that was created was that he is to, lessen the impact of load shedding. Was it a mistake or a blunder, to put it bluntly, to create that ministry? And as the ANC, do you think that Minister Sputla is doing what he was appointed to do, which is to sort of lessen the impact of load shedding? Let me rest it there for now.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Treaty Jones from ENCA. I just wanted to ask, are these fortnightly meetings a campaigning strategy for the ANC in an attempt to show the public that the ANC cares about issues that affect them? Because the question is that why is this only happening now that we'll be having fortnightly meetings? Because the consistent message from the Secretary General is that the ANC and government are separate entities. So what has changed now? Is this an attempt to regain ground for the elections? And of course, also reiterate what my colleague said here. The issue of SASA is not new. We do know that there was a non-payment under the former minister, Bathabile Dlamini, as well. But we were also promised that there would be systems in place to ensure that the poor are not affected, the elderly are not affected. It's painful to be seeing the elderly transporting themselves to get to the post office and they're told there isn't money. So what systems were put in place to make sure that failure does not happen, irrespective of who is in charge of processing these payments as well? And will you be summoning some of these deployees, particularly the Minister of Social Development, Lindiwe Zulu, to get a sense of accountability as to what really happened? Because initially we were told that there was a system glitch that happened where people didn't get paid. But we now know that also the company Electric Connection claims that it was not paid. And this will be put in place to ensure this accountability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can go ahead, Junior.
Junior Khumalo from Newsroom Africa. Excuse me. Just to ask about the
I think you said there is a commission that has been set up, led by Mauluko Kubai. What are the terms and references of this commission? And what's the need for this commission? There was also a meeting between the ANC and its alliance partners on Monday. It seems like the alliance partners were unhappy about these proposed cost-cutting measures. Can you just give us a bit of details on what happened in that meeting? Thank you.
Shall I start with these? Though if they are interrelated, maybe then we can do so. But I see that I still have to go that way, and then I will come this way.
Some are interrelated.
Okay. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, just on the cost-cutting measures, our colleagues from Econ just wanted to know that this isn't the first time that Treasury or the Minister, Kodoman, has actually spoken about the these measures. What are your views about the previous measures and whether they have been successful or not?
Maybe before you proceed, Mr. Smarting, sorry to come in
no
there,
problem.
because they are related. I don't want to come back to an issue that we've passed already. Maybe to hammer on further on what Pule was saying, do you believe that as it relates to the saga of SASA, I mean, that's the poorest of the poor. I asked this question to Mr. Kungubere himself today. Do you believe that they must resign? Him, Minister Kungubere, and Minister Zulu out of this saga, or it is now, or if it continues, because he put his head on the block that it won't continue. But when I asked him if he's willing to resign if it continues, he says that is in the hands of the employers, and the employers in terms of politics is the ANC as the deploying party to government. So do you believe that they should resign or be fired?
Let me start with the matter of cost containment measures, in the hope that we won't come back to it, at least for this purposes of this presser, until such a time, which is quite soon, when this internal process of consultation with our alliance partners and others has been undertaken and has been concluded. So we want to give space to that exercise. And the meeting you're referring to, which I was contacted about by some of yourselves, colleagues, yes, indeed took place on Monday, where these matters were discussed. And the purpose was really just to receive an extensive briefing by the ETC subcommittee, accompanied by Finance Minister, to come and get an extensive briefing to our national officials together with alliance leaders. And then following that process, a task team is currently at work to look at all of those measures, blow by blow, and to come to a particular set of recommendations. And that is obviously done with a full understanding that National Treasury has got a particular constitutional mandate. So you need to balance the consultation, but also balance that with the mandate of National Treasury, which is to keep the country working and to look at those things that we can do to keep the country working, whilst to make sure that we cushion and safeguard some of our hard-won gains. So in so doing, I'm responding to several questions in relation to the matter of cost containment measures. We should look out for that. It's going to be feedback, obviously, by the Secretary General once that has been concluded through the necessary and signed off by the necessary statutory structures. We don't just wake up and take a decision that has not been internally processed, because then it means we're not being responsible enough. So we're concluding that process of consultation. Alliance leaders and alliance members are autonomous organizations. They can always express their viewpoints. They are free to do so. But the ANC has got its own processes. In its processes, it must always make sure that there's ongoing consultation with alliance leadership. So I want to separate the statements that have been made by alliance leaders. I mean, that's entirely within their purview. But the ANC runs a process in the same way that we do with all other matters that are vexing and that are facing the nation. But I'm certain that there is going to be some detailed feedback from the governing party, because the governing party has got to be able to explain to South Africans about how we're using cost containment to protect investment, consumption, to secure jobs, to make sure that social protection, social assistance doesn't suffer. All of these things that are important that the ANC-led government has pioneered since the beginning of democracy. I'd like to leave it at that in as far as the matter of cost containment measures. There is a process. So that's the one. The second point about, of course, on the question of whether they should resign or not, I can't possibly make a call of that nature or even venture a thought, because I think that should be a product of some of these things. And this is now about the SASA, to the SASA question now. On the matter of SASA, I think sometimes, of course, when these things happen, we also lose sight of what's worked well for the longest time. Apart from one or two major glitches that have been experienced, and one of which you've just cited, Mawande, we all can agree, though, that the social security system in general has really proceeded uninterruptedly for close on 30 years. There would have been those moments where some of these things have happened. But I think the starting point is to say that in a country, and this is not us now peddling the narrative about under apartheid, this is what happened and this is what is happening under democracy. We're not saying that. But what we can say for sure is that grants for child-headed households, disability grants, old age grants, you name it, all the way to the 350 rands. The administration of those grants and the disbursements of those grants has proceeded uninterruptedly in South Africa for close to 3 decades. So in treating this particular glitch, which I think if you look at our statement that we issued about a week ago, we issued a very strong statement that said we've witnessed, and this came from reports from provinces, from our own structures, and not even so much from government reportage. We have witnessed elderly people standing in queues for days on end, and that we think we want to get an understanding of what has led to a situation that has a potential of impugning the dignity of our people. So I think the ANC has taken a very firm view on that matter, which is why it's been given the agency that it requires. The deployees that you're speaking about have briefed the leadership of the organization, and there's been emphasis that we need speedy action. And we are going to be studying, obviously, what government has done to date. And if there is a sense that we're not moving with the speed of execution that is required, I'm certain that the relevant structures in the ANC will have to do what is necessary to occasion that. But I think, again, that belongs to our normal internal processes. But I must say, and I think it's important to say to South Africans that have been impacted negatively, that this is something that we need to say it is regrettable. And we trust that, in fact, in a moment of that nature that unfolded, we have learned that much of those beneficiaries have now received their grants and are continuing to receive their grants. We need to test if and how many are still impacted by the glitches. And this is something that we're going to be monitoring using our policy and research unit on our own data, and to check some of that information. So that is just on a SASA matter. And as I said, we don't make a call about who must resign or not resign, because decisions of that nature belong to the appointed authorities in the organization, the constitutional structures of the ANC under the leadership of the president. So I know this is not a response that you are looking for, Mawande, but certainly this is as far as I can go on that particular matter. The commitment we can make is to come back with a very clear report about, in the Eastern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Limpopo, in the Western Cape, in Bonteheuwel, breaking it down ward by ward. This is the picture in terms of what has been accomplished. And I think we need to be able to provide South Africans with fact-checked information in as far as that is concerned. And then the matter related to Pule, back to you. So Junior, I hope I tackled the issues related to the terms of reference of the task team in my response, and of course about the entire process. And I've also, then I want to just turn to ENCA. Pule, this fortnightly media briefings you really should be interested in them, because here we're going to be reacting, and we're going to be starting certain conversations. We will do this even if we didn't have a general election coming up. It's good practice for an organization, certainly a governing party of our magnitude and our experience, collective experience, to stay connected with members of the media. You are our clients, and a client needs to be supported with information, fed with information, so that there's no second guessing what the ANC is thinking about on any given matter that's unfolding in the nation. We've also found that, of course, also the media space in South Africa is diverse, very diverse. And it's important that you actually support the media in that diversity. We also find that it's a space that is growing by leaps and bounds. Or maybe some growing faster, broadcasting, digital, much faster, print, it's maybe a different story. But it's important that in the way we communicate, in the way we do media liaison, there's a sense that we're servicing all of these various domains in the media. So we're doing it precisely for that reason. And it's a culture, and cultivating a culture of accessibility as well. And that we don't become accessible when you contact us, but we become accessible. Then you know that, if I can't find a communicator in the ANC, I know that I'm going to pile up all of my issues when I go to the Thursday presser. So it's as simple and as straightforward as that. Then and I hope that clarifies, it's not about the election. You should also check us after the election, because not only will we still be a governing party, not only because we will still be a governing party, but also because we will still be a liberation movement and the largest political organization on the continent. Then, just back to you, Mawande, on the NSFAS issue. Again, this is one of the things, and I'm not to take away the recent challenges. But if you look at the data that we've shared with you, which you can obviously verify with NSFAS itself and also verify with Stats SA, that data speaks volumes about the milestones that South Africa has accomplished under the ANC-led government in terms of enabling access by young people, black and Africans and African women, young women in particular, opening doors to higher education and further education and training. You'll be very hard-pressed to find a country in the world, in the global north, in the Scandinavia, that has achieved a massive feat as this one in terms of opening doors to higher education, living and being true to the mantra in the Freedom Charter that says the doors of learning and culture shall be opened. So the recent challenges within the NSFAS environment also have got to be looked at against that backdrop. Some of the challenges in the system because of the demands of the system. But we've also flagged the things that we think are not working that well in our statement. We also flagged the issue of the missing middle. And we're basically calling on the Minister of Higher Education working together with NSFAS to continue remodeling NSFAS, because it should be a continuum anyway, to address that particular gap, because it seems, as much as we have achieved so many things in the space, it does mean that there is still that young person that can't access funding for higher education on the basis of the set criteria at the moment. But I do think that, again, we've also seen the statement from the Minister of Higher Education. We were given an assurance that these matters are receiving urgent attention. We were also assured that there is no collapse of NSFAS as a body, and that there are matters that are being addressed, whether it's matters related to governance and so on. So we are comfortable, at least, with their ability to walk us through and navigate this particular season. And we urge that should be done with the speed that of execution and the discipline of execution that is required. The last one, load shedding. We've had some stage 6 moments, but we do know that we had those stage 6 moments, and I really don't want to be speaking out of 10 here, but I do know from the reports that I've looked at, the latest reports coming out of the presidency, that we had those intense moments because the system is trying to prepare us for lighter moments in the outer months. But I will leave that for the relevant deployee to speak to South Africans about. I think the one thing that Minister Ramaphosa has been good at has been to keep the nation abreast. It may sound like it's repetitive, but it's important because then at least there's communication, and I think would want to leave it at that. I don't believe that load shedding has intensified. I think we've had those moments that are trying to lift the pressure related to maintenance of some of the stations that require maintenance at any given point. But as I say, I think we know that the future outlook is positive from the reports that have been presented to the National Executive Committee. We hope that South Africans, when they do see the improvements, they should be able to vouch for that in a moment, in the fullness of time. Those were the main questions. So I didn't respond to question one by one. I was just trying and find a way of synthesizing some of the things that you yourselves, colleagues, are raising. I thought you had.
No, remember.
Okay, yeah, let me start with my sister over here.
Okay, SABC News. I just wanted to find out, particularly with regards to what has happened with the process of the cost containment, and some of the statements that were made in terms by the Minister of Finance in terms of the NHI. One starts to get the impression that, or to ask where the power lies. You say that the Treasury has a constitutional mandate, but it seems as if your deployee perhaps you need to rein him in a little bit, because the statements made about the NHI, given the fact that there's been such a long consultation process and there have been resolutions taken at successive national conferences about it, and for him to make the statements that he did make, for the cost containment process to, and to, the measures to be announced, and now the consultation happens after the fact because there's pushback, then one starts to wonder what is actually happening in terms of your particular deployee. Is he rogue? Is he a law unto himself?
Thank you, Busi. Natasha?
Okay, so I just have a couple of questions. On your nomination of ANC candidates for the National Intervention List, we spoke to the Secretary of the Election Committee, and he had told us that 47% of the branches have sat. Will you be asking for an extension as, the ANC? Correct me if I'm wrong, apparently you're supposed to have a special NEC to discuss this matter. When will this happen? And then my colleagues are actually doing a story on cadre deployment. So they've asked that why has the ANC turned to the Constitutional Court if the practice of the policy is constitutional? They also want to know why is the party fighting to keep those records sealed from the public? And then another question from them. So on this day, apparently the recall of a president by its own party first started on this day in 2008. So they're asking that the recall of President Beki set a precedent, as this was followed by another president being recalled before his term ended, President Zuma. Will this also happen to President Ramaphosa? Thank you.
Can I just deal with those two? Because there's a pecking order there from Natasha's.
Natasha. People's questions there. Come to
you ask 7 questions in a briefing.
It's certainly not me complaining. But to your very last question from your colleagues, they will definitely wait for a very long time for something like that to happen.
Okay.
The ANC leadership is coherent, unified, under the able and competent leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa. There has never been such even a thought or a discussion, to my knowledge, and I am the communicator for the ANC, so it will really be a long wait. Some things are precedent setting. Some moments in history can be precedent setting, but not all moments in history set that president has a way of manifesting into reality. So there is no such a thought. Our national officials operate as a cohesive, unified force. The National Executive Committee is quite unified. Where there are debates, the debates are in a comradely spirit, And of course, the culture in the ANC is that there are very robust debates on any given matter, including matters that you're talking about. But there is no question about any form of instability to be seen here and into the future until something catastrophic happens that at that point in time we will then speak to South Africans about, but there's no such a thought. We're totally unified. We are focused on winning the election. We focused on the renewal project, building strong branches, selecting competent, qualified, and capable and ethical candidates to represent us in public institutions, starting with the 2 houses of parliament, the 9 legislatures, all the way to municipalities, drawing on the experiences of our governance experience over all these years and knowing what not to do and what to do best. And so that is where we are focused. We focused on building an organization that is going to outlive those of us who are currently at the helm of leadership. Turning to the matter of cadre deployment, and I'm going to really navigate this one very carefully because, remember, we have already filed with the Constitutional Court. I am certain that some, if not all of you, have seen our papers. And so I would be loath to comment comprehensively as if we had not gone to the highest court in the land. But I'm going to speak on the issue of cadre deployment as a matter of principle and policy. And one of the things we've always said is that every single governing party that has been in governance across the world, you will find very few that they may not use the word cadre. Cadre is the language of the African National Congress, drawn from our years of struggle and a part of our internal lexicon. Every single party in South Africa deploys its cadres. The Democratic Alliance deploys its cadres. In fact, when they move into a city where they assume control of a city, if it is somebody that cannot be trusted in terms of party loyalty, they get moved. Think about Advocate Wallace Mkoto, the city of Cape Town, a great South African, very competent to the core. You can think about a number of countless examples in Tshwane, where party cadres of the DA were plonked there and obviously also embarrassed the party. I don't need to remind you of those names, of those in senior positions, including as mayors. Those were party cadres. You can think about any other party. You can think about the IFP. Party cadreship deployment is a standard practice. So there's absolutely nothing untoward about this notion of cadre deployment. We know that there is that dominant narrative that has become pervasive in society. As the ANC, we will continue to cultivate and create an awareness about our policy and about our understanding of what this policy entails. And one of the elements, key elements of our policy, is that the best people must be afforded an opportunity to play the various roles. The best people, best in terms of competence, best in terms of being ethical, best in terms of being fit for positions in terms of requisite qualifications, having gone through the necessary vetting processes, all of those things. And we will readily admit that not always has this happened the way the policy requires. And this is why there is such a strong focus by our electoral committee this time around to go through a very robust process of vetting anyone that wants to go or is being nominated to go to the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, including provincial legislatures and so on. You will judge for yourself in terms of the quality of the work output of the electoral committee that is chaired by former President Motlanthe. We are doing exactly that in order to really strengthen our internal controls and our internal control environment to get the right people. And not the right people also doesn't necessarily have to be card-carrying members of the ANC. We need to ensure that institutions of the state are opened up for competent patriots who can give something to South Africa on the basis of some of the criteria that I've highlighted. But those are some of the conversations that are taking place. I won't speak about the court challenge as I indicated, but I do say that as the ANC, we defend this principle. We also defend our internal discussions on this matter with the might that we will require to do so for as long as we can do so. The candidate selection process, sitting at 47% of the branches, obviously this doesn't yet meet the threshold that has been set. I would imagine that the chair of the electoral committee will then make the necessary representations to the Secretary General for onward transmission to the National Working Committee, to the national officials in the first instance, and to the National Working Committee and the National Executive Committee of the ANC to consider what ought to be done. It may very well be that by that time we would have met the threshold, but should that not be the case, clearly there are channels and those are within the control of the ANC. Because the idea ultimately is that our branches should have really been afforded an opportunity to participate meaningfully in selecting public representatives and those people that we believe can advance the agenda, the 30-year agenda of transformation that has been led by the ANC government over the past 30 years. Gusi, in terms of NHI, is the minister rogue, on the loose, speaking to pronouncements around the NHI? All I can say about this is that as the ANC, we urge our deployees to stick to party policy. That is our stance. Our deployees should stick to party policy. The president has been consistent in advancing a strong argument, including recently at the UN, about the fact that we are going to be rolling out this national health insurance because we really want to ensure that there's universal access to health care to cushion the poor in our country. This is one of the initiatives that are being loaded internationally. That is the official position of the ANC, and all our deployees should stick to it. On the matter of public hearings, I mean, as it is now, we do want to use this opportunity also to encourage our structures, encourage civil society, non-government organizations, individual South Africans, wherever these public hearings that are being hosted under the aegis of Parliament, to participate in those hearings that are taking place on the NHI, so that we can definitely give more meaningful expression to the fact that this important piece of legislation is going to be of great benefit to those that really need it the most. And those public hearings are currently underway in the different provinces, and many are coming up. And I think we should use the opportunity to do as much publicity for those public hearings. But the position of the ANC on NHI is very strong, even at a time when it's been opposed by all and sundry. I understand that the DA, I mean, is mounting a legal challenge. You should correct me on the NHI. Continues to mount the challenge on the NHI, and a number of others that sit from a position of privilege. But this is something that we are proceeding with, and we will be in a position also using our electoral majority that we're given by the people of South Africa. I'm going to go to my colleagues over there.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You haven't doubted that the cost containment measures, the fact that the measures were articulated and were put out there, and now the consultation is happening after the fact as a result of this 84 that you're talking about. Is it enough to simply say we urge our employees to stick to ANC policy?
Well, I suppose that conversation would have taken place between the minister and national officials. As you know, I'm not a national official, but I can say that some of these documents of government, and this is one of them, that was released not officially. By the time it found its way into the public domain, it wasn't through the official channels. I'm not speaking for Treasury. It's not my job to do so. My job is to speak for the ANC. But I do think that you should also take that into account. I want to proceed over there. Anyone? The start? Okay, we sorted. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That sounds like an afterthought. I'm going to turn to.
Yes.
Khutadzo. I'm well. How are you?
What is the ANC's view on the proposal that was made to the president by National Treasury around, possibility of closing several critical programs such as detective services, EPWP, in order to, if the country was to continue dispersing the 350 SRD grants. What is the ANC's view on that? I mean, there's about over 100 programs that were proposed to be closed for you. You will need over 100 billion in the next 2 or 3 years in order to continue that. What is the ANC's view on that? And then, can you just give us an update perhaps on the NDC processes that are taking place regarding the MPs, the ANC MPs that worked against the party position on Palapala matter, but also the Mkhwebane vote. Also, has the ANC made any progress still on that in regards to the going through the assessment report that was presented to the ANC by the Chief Whip in Parliament around how the 230 MPs have performed in this term that is coming to next year? And then maybe lastly, and apologies colleagues, the SOE holding company. So there's a bill that was gazetted, I think last week Friday, which basically paves the way for the holding company to be established. So this holding company is meant to house most of these SOEs that are currently in DPE. However, the Youth League, among other ANC structures, are saying such a move would contradict the resolution of the ANC, which basically says SOEs need to go back to their policy department, so Transnet back to transport, ESCOM to energy and stuff. But the holding company and this bill, this SOE bill, seem to suggest that they will still be housed in something else rather than going back to their policy department.
You spoke about SRC.
SRD grants. It means he was used to chowing SRC money.
It's just that I wondered for a moment if you were one of those SRC leaders.
He was chowing the money.
Okay, all right. Okay. Can we try and conclude it with yourself, my brother?
It's been 7 months since Eskom has been a permanent CEO. Is the ANC concerned that permanent CEO has been appointed? Because there has been reports that Minister Madikura know that the Eskom board did give him names, but he's not happy. And did Mr. Madikura get the ANC to confidence why a permanent CEO hasn't been appointed yet? And just to follow up on the Chief of the Parliament wasn't very impressed with Minister Zuma, who wasn't there with the voting of to remove the former public prosecutor. Will any action be taken against Minister Zuma or not? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that colleagues like to hear their own voices, even if something has already been asked. But it's okay. It's an angle issue. The last two hands, please. Mwanda and then.
Yeah. Sure. We'll go first. Okay. Sister Thing, again, just on the issue of, I think Natasha touched on the cadre deployment issue, but I also stand to be corrected. You remember just in June, there was a report around how Gauteng has most senior managers in government who are not qualified for their jobs. How is the ANC ensuring that the deployees, who are the political heads, are ultimately in charge of ensuring that these systems are not abused, where people are just appointed and they don't qualify for their jobs? And then also, just on the issue of the SASA issue again, I know you speak about a 30-year track record, and I mean this is not just a glitch. It's a non-payment issue that is affecting societies and the most vulnerable as well. We recently had a situation where school children didn't receive meals, and this of course comes as a non-delivery. What kind of, do you think there should be a different approach as to how, deployees are disciplined and that they are held to account harshly to ensure that even those who believe in the ANC do not lose hope in the organization, because the mood on the ground really is quite low as well. Thank you.
Thanks. But maybe just to hammer on the last point that Pule is making, and Busi and Khutazo made reference to it as well. Khutazo as it relates to the MPs, Busi as it relates to Minister Konongwan. The current SG, when he came into office, he was very big on the talk. In fact, his biggest talk post his election was discipline. But all evidence points to the contrary. It looks like the ANC, not him in person, but he represents the ANC, has completely lost control of its deployees, be it in parliament, be it in government, because Minister Konongwan is not the only one. I mean, it goes back to the issues of underperforming ministers just getting away with it. In fact, as Busi asked the point, is the ANC the center, or the center lies elsewhere, and where is that center?
Thank you very much, colleagues.
So just to add that again, Minister Lindiwe Zulu was not present during today's press conference in regards to the issues of SASSA. I know they say she was traveling, but also that really sends a wrong message as to how these issues are not seriously attended to in regards to the elderly not receiving their grants as well. Thanks.
Well, I wouldn't be able to account for her absence because I probably reports to the president. But there is an overarching matter that colleagues are raising around where is the center, and do we really have accountability? Do we have a way of holding deployees to account? So all of those interrelated questions. I want to just start off by saying that one of the things that the ANC identified, particularly this 55th National Conference elected National Executive Committee, was the absence of what we refer to as an accountability, performance and accountability framework. That work is now being concluded, but it must now serve the relevant statutory bodies in the organization, which serves as a basis for assessing whether Mahlengi is doing or is performing according to what is expected of her, whether they are deployed in government or in the ANC. So we're hoping that we will have more improvements in as far as demonstrating to society that the ANC is the center, because the ANC is the center. Even in the absence of such a framework, there has been a number of public deployees that get called to Lutuli House to come and explain a particular action or a particular direction or a particular matter. So that is being done. And I can say this without any equivocation, led by the Secretary General. In the nature of those conversations, you don't determine before you engage with people to understand the system a bit more broadly. But I do note the concerns that are being asked, and I think hopefully in the SG's statement when it comes to interact with members of the media, this will be ventilated a bit more comprehensively given the responsibility that he has, if you like, as the chief enforcer of discipline, because all of these structures have got to report to him on behalf of national officials. So, but we're comfortable that that accountability framework, and maybe we should look closely at it when we release it, will assist us to ensure that there are common ways of holding people to account without looking at the face of an individual. Now, that same, that all of that would then, including the performance report, the review that is currently, has been concluded now, reviewing the performance of our MPs, reviewing the performance of our ministers, that has been concluded. But like any other process of that nature, which is the first time the ANC has done such a comprehensive job, it would normally be done just by a caucus and it stays with caucus. But it's now has been an organization-wide exercise that must go to the National Executive Committee, because you can't talk about my performance without giving me a chance to ventilate or at the required levels. So that will be done, and members of the media will be apprised of that report. We owe it to South Africans to communicate about performance, especially of those that are in public service, because they don't serve the ANC, they serve the people of South Africa deployed by the ANC. I noted that the DA has said they want that report to be disclosed. I would have wanted to tell South Africans as to whether they've done a review of the performance of their own deployees, because we should all be transparent. But we carry the responsibility of leading because we are the governing party, and we have a full appreciation of that responsibility. It is a pity that we would find situations where there's still data that talks about unqualified individuals being found in some senior echelons, particularly in a province such as Gauteng. Because as far as we know, the province has very strong vetting mechanisms set up during the current premier's time, who's been very diligent in terms of wanting to really build a meritorious civil service in the province, the same under Premier Makura and others. So we have to look at what is not working in the system, should the stats that you're sharing be worth any salt, to examine that a lot. I'm not in a position to react to that offhand without having understood what cause and effect matters as far as that is concerned. But I think it would really be deeply concerning should that be the case. Member of the matter of Eskom, well, I mean, you do need to avoid governance dilemmas, and that would just be our view. I think those are governance issues. When the minister engages with the board, there must be a governance-related requirement to be met when you appoint a CEO. There is a CEO that's already been recommended. But I would imagine that the minister together with the board they are to work together to make sure that there are no governance failures in the appointment of the CEO. But we would find out, obviously, we will get a briefing as we normally do from Minister Godan about issues that are affecting the appointment of this particular CEO. We can sit at Little House and say, no, he's wrong or not. But we need to be apprised as to what the reasons are. I'm sure that our deployees are very keen to ensure the stabilization of Eskom. And we've seen a lot of stabilization of Eskom since this board came on stream. So we just need to complete this thread, but it's going to be done also in a responsible fashion. So one of the things that is the party we are careful to do is not to overreach as far as issues of leadership in government, for as long as it's done without undermining the mandate and the mandate from the people of South Africa. I hope I have not left out anything. Oh, sorry, the very last one, the NDC, and that matter around those key critical projects, including some capital projects as well. We have the assurance that those will not be affected, but I will not cover that because that is supposed to be the subject of this task team. But we do know for a fact that the ANC is very clear about projects that have got job or work opportunity creation potential or reality should not be disrupted, because those are livelihoods of our people. And I will just leave it at that because we still need to get that report. I do not want to preempt in the public domain what is still going to be discussed. The Chief Whip wrote, this is now just for fact, the Chief Whip in our Parliamentary Caucus, Comrade Pemi Majolina, did compile a report, as she would be required to do so by the rules of caucus and the rules of the ANC, about the matter that included those that absented themselves from that 3-line whip, and that included Comrade Nkosazana. It's not limited to Comrade Nkosazana. We don't look at the face when we discuss these issues. We discuss matters of principle. Compiled the report and sent it to the Secretary General. The SG obviously would, in wisdom, refer that to the appropriate constitutional organ, which is the National Disciplinary Committee. And regarding how far the case is, that the previous case, how far the processing of that previous case by the NDC, I'm not at liberty to issue a statement on behalf of the NDC. That gets done by the chair of the National Disciplinary Committee, Dr. Ralph Mgijima. But that's the process, that's the course of action. that gets followed, including, of course, allowing those that are impacted by such a report to ventilate their issues using the platforms available through the NTC. But it is a disciplinary matter, and it's been processed as such. I think we are done now.
The holding company.
Oh, the matter of the holding company.
Yeah.
I can indicate that a presentation has been made, but that presentation is en route to the NEC. Of course, the Youth League is free to articulate its perspectives on any matter, for as long as, of course, it's not diversion from the core principles of the ANC. But the ANC Youth League speaks for itself and can always speak for itself and advance its views within the ANC to persuade others in the ANC about the correctness of their perspectives. But there is a report that we've seen that is going to be looked at by the NEC around the nature of the reorganization of ESCOM in such a way that it's not a deviation from the conference resolution and does not amount to privatization, because I think the ANC has been very clear on that. All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. It's almost dark. Thank you for coming through. And I suppose we're done now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I understand. I think at least next time is I understand. Sometimes you do business. I see earlier time lunchtime. No, I understand. Yeah.